Happy Tuesday, and welcome back to Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. Let's get you 5 more great stories to help get you through this trying week. Today's tales are all about strange killers, and I think we've got a pretty good lineup for you today. Starting off, we have a tale about a childhood punishment that may have gone a little farther than the father intended it to. Let's hear a story about the bean jar.
Dad was always kind of a weird guy. Weird and strict. I always thought it was just because he was a single parent, but even that seemed to only barely cover his odd behavior. He expected the best of me, expected my chores to be done, expected the rules to be followed, and if I didn't, there was only one punishment that would do. Dad never hit me with a belt. He never spanked me with his hand. He never took my stuff or put me in time out. No, Dad had a different sort of punishment he used. He didn't introduce the jar until I was 6, and it was revealed with a lot of serious contemplation. I remember coming home from my first day of kindergarten and finding Dad sitting in the living room, the jar on the little end table where the magazines and the rickrack usually stood. The jar may have begun life as a pickle jar. It always smelled a little briny, and inside were beans. They were spotted pinto beans, the kind I had used on art projects and crafts since before I could remember, and I noticed that they had been filled up to the brim. All in all, there were probably about 3 bags of beans in there, and a piece of scotch tape declared it to be my jar. "Take a seat. We need to have a serious talk," he said, and I ended up just sitting on the floor of our living room and looking up at him. He looked very serious, more serious than I'd ever seen him before, and that scared me a bit. Up until now, Dad had always been this goofy guy who played pirates and astronauts and Mario Kart with me. But now he looked like a judge, ready to sentence me to death if I didn't have a pretty good defense for my crimes. "You're 6 now, long past knowing right from wrong. In this family, it's customary to use the bean jar to punish children. Do you see this jar?" He asked it like there was any way I could miss it. I nodded, and he smiled, seeming pleased. "The bean jar symbolizes you. It's everything you are and everything you might be. So from now on, when you're bad or insolent or you disobey my orders, I will not yell at you or send you to your room. I won't do anything but take a bean from the bean jar." I almost laughed. Was this a game or something? Was I supposed to be scared of a jar of beans? This had to be another one of Dad's jokes. Dad was always doing stuff like this, telling me how the monsters in my closet could be kept away by a teddy bear, or that the cavity creeps would eat my teeth if I didn't brush them twice a day. Dad was a goofball. He had always been a goofball, but I think it was his face that made me wonder if he was joking or not. Throughout the whole thing, he just sat there, deadly serious, and never averted his eyes from me. "You're a smart kid, just like I was. I see now that you'll need an example. You may think this is just a regular jar, but you're wrong." He reached in and picked up a bean. Dead wrong. He didn't even take it out. He just lifted a little, hovering it over the pile. But he didn't need to do anything else. Suddenly, miraculously, it felt like someone was touching my brain. It was the feeling of getting a sudden sadness, a sudden bit of anxiety, and I wanted him to drop that bean back into the jar. I needed to be whole. I needed all my beans, and he must have seen that on my face, because he dropped it back in, and I trembled as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I'm sorry, but you have to know what's at stake here. You're my last chance. I have to make sure that you're perfect. And the bean jar knows perfection from flaw. My own father used this method, and his father before him. The bean jar is always used until the child's 18th birthday, or until all the beans are gone. I was panting when I asked him what would happen if all the beans were gone. He looked at me without mirth, without any sign of a joke or a goof. You don't want to know. That was how it started with the bean jar. Dad didn't suddenly turn into an ogre or become a villain overnight. He went back to being the same guy he'd always been. We would play video games together, build with my Legos, play pretend after school. My dad had never scared me like that before. He and I were always really close, but I remember how we would get when he had to take beans out of the jar. His face would become completely neutral, and he would walk to the jar and take out a bean before crushing it between his thumb and forefinger. The bean jar was utilized even for the most trivial of infractions. Forgot to wash my dish? Lose a bean. Forgot to put my clothes away? Lose a bean. Stayed up too late on a school night? Lose a bean. There was no escalation either. There was never any difference between forgetting to clean up my toys or yelling at Dad because I was frustrated. It was always one bean at a time, ground to dust between his large, calloused fingers. He would look at me, too, with this mixture of pain and resolve once it was done, his stoicism only going so far. Those times he took a bean, however, were unbearable. It felt as if each bean was a piece of my psyche, and he was turning it to dust. As a child, every bean made me hyper-aware of my actions, but I was still just a child. Sometimes I forgot things. Sometimes I was lazy. Sometimes I thought I could sneak around and get away with not doing what I was told. I was always caught, always punished, and I always fell into a state of anxious, nervous emotions once it was done. I hated the way it felt when he crushed those beans, and I didn't want to lose another one. I didn't want to lose them so badly that I trained myself to perform the task expected of me without fail. 5 a.m., start the laundry. 5:20, make breakfast. 5:30, wash my dishes. 5:40, dress. 6 o'clock, clean up my room. 6:30, backpack on, fully dressed, waiting by the door to leave. 3:10, get home, do my homework. 4:30, clean the house. 5, start dinner. 6, eat dinner when my father got home. 9 o'clock, brush teeth, take shower. 9:30, bedtime. Every day, without fail, these things were done, or I would be one bean the shorter. This manifested itself into a kind of mania in me. Not only did I have to get all my chores done, but I needed to get good grades too. After a while, good wasn't good enough. What if Dad decided that C's and B's weren't good enough? I strove for all A's, and Dad seemed happy with my efforts. To the other kids, however, I was a weirdo. I didn't really have any friends. Dad was my only friend, but it was a strange kind of friendship, like living with someone who has schizophrenia and could change at the slightest inclination. I didn't have any real friends, not till high school, when I met Cass. Cassandra Bigley was not what you would consider a model student. Her parents had high expectations for her, but she was middling at best. She came to me because I was the smartest kid in school, at least according to the other kids, and she begged me to help her. I helped her, I tutored her, showed her the way, and soon her grades improved. That was how we became friends, how she was the first one to find out about the bean jar. So, what? He just takes out a bean and crushes it? Yes, I said, not sounding at all mystified about the process. And what? I mean, you have less beans? I thought about it. Dad had never actually told me what would happen, only that it would be terrible. When he takes out all the beans, then something awful will happen. Like what? No dessert for a month? I don't know, but I know that when he crushes those beans, it's like a piece of my sanity is mushed. I feel crazy after he smushes a bean. I don't like feeling that way. I don't like it at all. I started crying. I hadn't meant to. I was 16 and I never cried anymore. But Cass didn't make me feel bad about it. She just held me while I cried, and eventually I stopped. It had felt good to be held. Dad hugged me, but he never comforted me. I didn't have a mom, someone whose job seemed to be comforting me. And as Cass held me, I realized what I had been missing all these years. I had been missing a mom that I had never even known. We hung out a lot after that, Cass and I. Despite our age, it was never inappropriate. She gave me something I'd been missing, a friend without the threat of punishment looming over our relationship. The realization made me feel different about my dad. He was still the lovable goofball that he had always been, but I started to see how our entire relationship hung under the shadow of that bean jar. As I pulled away, he became more sullen, more suspicious, and I saw him holding the bean jar sometimes as if he wished to smash them. If I wasn't misbehaving, though, he couldn't. That was always the deal, and he knew it. I knew it, and he knew that as long as I abided by the rules, he couldn't punish me. Despite how it will sound, Dad was never cruel about the bean jar. He never used it to take out his frustration. He never came home and punished me simply because he had had a bad day. The rules were established. We had both agreed to them, and I knew that by following them, I could be safe. I think, deep down, Dad really did think he was doing the best for me, thought he was molding me into something better than I could be. And I guess he was right. Though it wasn't fair. Not really. Then, one day, after coming home from Cass's, it all came to a head. Dad was supposed to be at work, so Cass and I came back to the house to play video games. She had never even seen a Super Nintendo, and she wanted to play some Mario Kart with me. We had come in, laughing and making jokes, when someone cleared their throat loudly, sending a chill up my spine and turning me slowly toward my dad. He was sitting on the couch. He looked so much like he had the day that he had introduced the bean jar, and he was wearing that look of pain and resolve. You come home late, your chores aren't done, your homework is undone, and you've brought someone here without my permission. Why have you decided to break the rules like this? I saw the hammer come down on the table, but I hadn't realized what he'd done until then. It turned the bean that he had laid there into smithereens, and I shuddered as I gripped my head and moaned. If he noticed, he made no comment. He just brought the hammer down on another one, and I nearly vomited as a pain like no other went through me. He had lined up 4, 1 for each infraction, but he had never done anything like this before. It had always been 1 at a time, and that had been bad enough. This, however, was unbearable. "Stop it!" Cass yelled. "Whatever you're doing to him, stop!" But he cut her off. He grabbed her under the arm and heaved her towards the door. This is your fault. You've changed him, made him forget his purpose, but I won't let you kill him. You aren't allowed in this house, never again, and I put her down," I growled, finding my feet and weaving only a little. "You will not touch her." My father looked at me, not believing what he was hearing. "Put her down now," I repeated, stepping up close and getting in his face. You dare to challenge me? You're no different than the rest. I tried to raise you better, but it appears I was a fool. I'll smash every damn bean in that jar if I have to. When all the beans are gone, you'll cease to exist. I'll smash every damn bean in that jar just to prove... Just to prove... But he never finished. He let go of the hammer as he clutched at his chest, and it fell from his grip as he grasped at his shirt front. His face had gone from red to purple, and before he hit the ground, it was nearly black. I just stood there for a moment, listening to Cass beat on the door and ask what was wrong. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, feeling like I was suffocating as the realization that my father was dead fell across me. That was 2 years ago. I've been living with Cass since then, her parents taking me in gladly. Cass and I are getting ready for college, and that's when I remembered the house. It's still there, still sitting on the same lot, and I decided that it might be good to sell it so I can pay tuition. There were things inside as well. I've been back a few times to get things, and I knew my father's room was essentially untouched. The police hadn't bothered to search the place. Dad's death was no mystery, after all, and they decided that he had died of a heart attack and saved me a lengthy interrogation. I started cleaning it out as summer began, selling what I could and donating what I couldn't. I found pictures of my dad and I, taken in better times, and far too soon I'd cleaned out everything and was left with only my father's room. I paused at the door, almost feeling like a burglar when I thought about going in there. But finally I decided that this was my house now, and this room was as good as mine too. The room was Spartan, a bed and a dresser and a closet, but it was what I found inside that took me by surprise. 5 jars, each of them bearing a different name. Jacob, Mark, Sylvester, Katie, and James. They were empty, the lids gone, and the taped-on names made them look exactly like mine. What the hell was this? Who were these people? I didn't know any of them, and no one but Dad and I had ever lived in the house. It had always been just the two of us. Always just... No. But no, that couldn't be true, because my mother had once lived with us. There in the back was a sixth jar, the glass broken, but the tape intact. Maggie. When the beans are gone, I heard Dad's voice echo in my head. Then you cease to exist. Had the names on those jars been real people? Had I lived with them and simply didn't remember them? How could you remember people who never existed? I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of it all, and finally decided to write this before it gets unclear. Apparently, Dad wasn't as crazy as I might have thought, and maybe I should have been more respectful of the bean jar. It sits on the shelf in my dorm room now. I took it from the house before I sold it, and I guard it jealously. I don't know if it still works the same now that Dad is dead, but I'm not taking any chances.
Makes you long for the timeout chair, doesn't it? Our next story is about a girl's obsession with a local celebrity, and maybe a local legend, too. The scariest part is usually having to hear me sing. Let's hear a story about the Bunny Man. There once was a man with ears, you see, in the dead of the night he'll come for thee. He'll drag you into the woods to scream, and there your bones he'll gnaw. Soon shall the Bunny Man come to take you away from your dad and mum. Soon shall the Bunny Man come, and your soul shall belong to him. Stop it, Catherine! I'd scream, but Catherine just cackled and sang it all the louder. I can still remember my sister's face because of that ghoulish smile she wore while she tormented me. We grew up in New Zealand, so the shanty was something old that we changed for our own purposes. Many of the kids sang it, but my sister was the first to adopt it into something different from the original. A few kids had added some creative lyrics to the original song, usually something about farty men or something, but Catherine had turned it into a song about the Bunny Man. She was forbidden from singing it at school. By our parents and teachers, and she took it as an excuse to sing it for me at every opportunity. It was usually sung low, under her breath, so my parents couldn't hear it, so she could deny it when I began crying about it. It was in poor taste anyway. The Bunny Man may have been an urban legend, but the man going around kidnapping children was very real. That summer, 13 children had gone missing in the city we lived in. All of them were from poor families like ours, who lived in tenement buildings, much like ours. They always disappeared in the middle of the night after being lured out of their houses, and there was always some sign left behind that tied them together. Whether it was spray painted on their door, the fence behind their house, or the sides of the building they lived in, the calling card was always left in plain white spray paint for the police to find. A white rabbit head in a white circle, the sign of the Bunny Man. My sister had started humming the little shanty after the 7th kid had gone missing. I had heard her in her room, working through the lyrics as we did homework. She would hum them to herself in a distracted way that people often do while they're trying to figure something out. As she scratched away at the math problem, she would argue with herself and make corrections to the grisly little shanty she was constructing. I would shudder to myself as I heard what she was writing, and I think I might have become her horrified little barometer. The more I shuddered, the more lyrics I heard that stayed in place. By the time school started again in August, her shanty had taken form, and she began her reign of terror. Catherine and I were 2 years apart. I had started 6th grade, and she had started 8th, and she seemed to delight in terrorizing the other girls in my class with her Bunny Man song. She would walk behind groups of students, humming the tune at first as they walked from class or to lunch. Then she would begin singing the words to herself, low at first, building volume, until a few of them started to hear what she was singing and become noticeably upset. Then she would run up behind the group, caterwauling the last verse as she sent them screaming and running in all directions. That's how she had earned herself a suspension from school and a grounding from our parents. That's why she was home that night, the night of December 15th.
the night the Bunny Man did indeed come. We were both grounded that night, actually. My sister was grounded after being suspended from school for her Bunny Man shenanigans, but she didn't much care. She was happy to put off schoolwork and watch TV all day and suffer the wrath of our parents. I, however, was grounded for encouraging these antics by saying I had seen the Bunny Man. It wasn't a joke, though. I wasn't trying to encourage Catherine in her bad behavior. I had woken up for the 6th night in a row, hearing someone humming that shanty and going to the window to see who it was. I couldn't actually be hearing anyone, I realize now. Our loft was on the 5th floor, looking out on a vacant lot and the road behind the building. There was no way I should be able to hear anything. I could, though. I can clearly remember hearing that shanty, hummed in a gravelly baritone that sounded as though it were right outside the window. The first few times I heard it, I went to the window and looked out on the lot. In the moonlight, he was standing there, in the road, a man in a dingy gray rabbit costume, his eyes glowing yellow and his ears cocked almost jauntily. My parents would hear me screaming and come running into the room to see what was going on. They would find me on the floor, screaming and pointing out the window, always gibbering about the Bunny Man. After the 3rd night, I didn't even go to the window. I would lie in bed and sob as the shanty bore its way into my brain. I would sob and call for them, screaming about the damn Bunny Man, until finally, my father couldn't take it anymore. That's why both of us were grounded on the night in question, the night our parents went out. It was supposed to be a family night. We were supposed to go out and have a real family meal, see a movie, maybe get some ice cream. Instead, my father had been using it as a punishment for my sister after she'd gotten in trouble. We 3 would go out and have fun while she stayed home and did not. My mother, however, thought this was a little harsh, and she had been pleading with him to reconsider. This had made him a little short, and after being woken up by my screaming all week, he had reached his limit. He grounded me as well, thinking I was trying to egg my sister on with all this Bunny Man nonsense, and announced that he and my mother were going on a date instead. "We will be back at 10. You 2 are to be in bed by 8:30. If I come in and you're still awake, you will be severely punished." Then they left, and for a few hours we'd gotten along pretty well. Catherine made dinner, heating up some canned pasta in the microwave, and then we'd watch some TV as the sun set and the evening wore on. It wasn't until 8, when I got off the couch and started for bed, that she started in on her old ways. She asked what I was doing, and when I told her I was going to get ready for bed, she asked me why. "You heard, Dad. If we're still up when he gets here, we're going to get in trouble." "Pfft, probably just scared the Bunny Man will hear you awake and come get you." "I am not," I lied. "R2, you're in such a hurry to go to sleep, so the Bunny Man will come and take you away." She leaned towards me, grinning that awful grin. "Oh, there once was a man with ears, you see." I put my hands over my ears and started running away as she sang all the louder and chased me. "In the dead of the night, he'll come for thee." "Catherine, stop it," I sobbed. We were running up the hall, and as I wheeled into my room, I tried to slam the door and lock her out. She battered the door aside and bore down on me, grinning and singing as I cowered beneath the window. I was covering my head with my arms, sobbing uncontrollably as I tried to block her out. She stalked towards me, bellowing the song now and scritching her hands like claws as she walked towards me. "Soon shall the Bunny Man come to bring..." But she stopped suddenly, and as the silence stretched on, I opened my eyes and looked up to find her looking out the window as she loomed over me. She was staring out the window, transfixed by whatever she saw there, and this new game was almost scarier than the shanty. Her face held a look I was unused to seeing. She was startled, unsure of what she was looking at, but it also appeared that there was terror there. Something outside the window was really spooking her, and I scrambled up to peek under her arm so I could see too. It seemed I was peeking into one of my nightmares. Standing in the road, right under a streetlight, was a man in a tattered gray bunny costume. It wasn't like a Halloween costume, some of which looked like pajamas more than costume, but it was a full suit of coarse-looking gray fur. The fur was matted and dark in places, kinky and tangled like a stuffed animal that needs to be brushed. The head was obscured by a black hood, some kind of costume hood that just slid over the head, and the face was a flat black nothing as it stared at our building. No, not at our building, as it stared at us. On top of the hood, someone had stapled a pair of thin, emaciated gray rabbit ears, one of which bent at an almost jaunty angle. He stood on the street and stared up at us, my sister and I frozen in terror at the sight of the legendary Bunny Man. All at once, I heard a gruff, tuneless humming from the street that sounded startlingly like Catherine's shanty. He had no words to go along with it. He only hummed and stared, and I think we both felt an almost magnetic desire to stare back at him. It was like the scene in a scary movie where the monster's out in the open, and you pray that none of the characters are stupid enough to go confront him. In your heart, though, you know that one of them is. Catherine, it appeared, was that one. I caught her by the arm as she turned from the window. She looked back at me, her face full of confused anger and unsure deliberation. She was clearly at odds with herself, and my sister was not someone who was used to being unsure of her actions. She was a brat, and she was a terror, but I had always kind of believed that everything she did was a calculated course of risk and reward. This was something else, though. This was her acting against her will. After all, she had sung about the Bunny Man coming for others, and now it appeared he had come for her instead. She jerked her hand away and left the room. When I heard the front door open and close, I moved back to the window, waiting for her to appear. The Bunny Man went right on humming, right on watching, as though he was trying to call me as well. I felt the pull. Really, I did, but my fear kept me rooted to the spot. I clutched the windowsill tightly, the paint chipping a little as my fingers gripped it, and I would find splinters under my nails the next day, though I didn't notice them at the time. Then she appeared in the backyard, walking like a sleepwalker, and going to him as she vaulted the chain-link fence between the yards and the road. He reached for her, and now I could hear both of them humming that hateful song and staring up at me. It filled my head like a hive of bees, and I knelt my head against the glass as I prayed that it would stop. There would be no way I could resist if they both sang, and I could feel the pull as they tried to drag me out the door as well. After about 60 seconds of them humming and staring, she took his hand, and the two of them disappeared up the road. My parents came home 3 hours later to find me curled up on the floor of my bedroom, sobbing and gibbering as I rocked and mumbled about the Bunny Man. They searched the house, thinking that my sister had gone too far. She had finally scared me too much, and now she was going to have to answer for it. As my mother sat with me, trying to console me, my father tore up the house looking for Catherine. He clearly expected her to be hiding somewhere inside, probably running when she heard the front door open. When he couldn't find her inside, he went looking for her at her friends' houses. Their parents told him, often grumpily, that they hadn't seen Catherine, but they would call if they did. He got worried, going to look up and down the street for her, expecting her to be hidden somewhere in fear of retribution. All the while, Mom tried to calm me down and get a straight answer out of me. After about an hour, I started talking about the Bunny Man and how he had come to get us, how Catherine had left with him. She started to get angry, telling me that she was tired of hearing about the damn Bunny Man. However, when I refused to deviate from my story, she started to take me a little more seriously. The police were called, the neighborhood was searched, people were questioned, and the woods were combed for the next week and a half. No sign was ever found of my sister, or the Bunny Man. No sign was ever found of any of the children abducted by the Bunny Man that year. That was 15 years ago now. The Bunny Man took only one more child that year, a 7-year-old, on Christmas Eve, and then was never seen again. They never found the remains of any of the children he kidnapped, and no one was ever arrested in connection with the kidnappings. There was never any bunny suit found or a murder weapon discovered in the woods. Whoever was doing this had just stopped. I'm 27 now. My own daughter is 8. Her dad's not really in the picture, which leaves a lot of time for just us. I was getting ready for bed one night, Emily playing in her room before bedtime, when I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The tune, a familiar tune that everyone in town knows, crept up the hallway. The tune wasn't what stopped me, though. It was the lyrics that made me shiver. The words she sang transported me back in time, and suddenly I was 12 years old again, watching my older sister creep towards me as she sang the same hateful words. However, the voice that sang them was childish, lilting the words with no more care than she would have had for any other nursery rhyme. There once was a man with ears, you see, in the dead of the night he'll come for thee. He'll drag you into the woods so green, and there your bones he'll gnaw. Soon shall the bunny man come to take you away from your dad and mum. Soon shall the bunny man come, and your soul shall belong to him. I peeked around the corner of the doorframe and saw her on the floor playing with blocks, oblivious to what she was singing. Emily, where did you hear that song? She got up and walked to her bed, giggling as she crawled under the covers. From the funny lady. What funny lady? I asked, bending to tuck her in, but finding my hands incapable. She comes and sings at night sometimes. After you go to sleep, I'll wake you up so you can hear her next time. When I go to the window, she's standing on the street. She has ears on top of her hood, Mommy. Isn't that silly? I told her it was very silly, but I didn't feel like laughing in the least bit. Emily's in my bed now, sleeping soundly, as I pin this warning to anyone whose children have heard this song too. I'm afraid it's not an urban legend. It's not a hoax. The Bunny Man is real, and it seems that he's not alone anymore. He's coming for our children again, and I, for one, don't mean to lose my daughter to this creep or his children. As I lay here writing, I can almost hear it on the breeze, as if someone's singing it outside my window. Emily is stirring in her sleep. It appears it may not just have been in my head. I fear it may already be too late.
It's always fun to explore local legends a little deeper, isn't it? Coming up next, we have a strange mailbox service that lets you solve mysteries, though the mystery you solve may still be ongoing. Let's hear a story about Hunt-A-Killer.
When the box arrived, Emily was thrilled. She'd been waiting for this particular package since March, and at long last it was here. Emily had been trying to get into one of these cold case box services for a while. Hunt-A-Killer, Cold Case, Sleuth Kings, she'd requested them all, but all Emily got back were apology letters and promises that they would contact her when they had room. The folks at Catch-A-Killer had placed her on their tentative waiting list, which sometimes took months, and she hadn't expected to be added to the list for quite some time. It was hard to get added. They only approved a few hundred people a year, and they were also one of the more popular groups. The service was their typical monthly subscription box, where they sent a cold case that the small group you found yourself to be a part of tried to solve. They would send clues a few at a time, a slow drip of evidence that would lead the group to the end conclusion, and they would follow the trail to a predictable end. As she brought the box inside, Emily felt giddy with anticipation. However, some of it was tempered when she stopped to look at the box. The label said "To Catch a Killer," but the address label was torn off, and the box looked a little bit funny. If this was their way of creating ambience, then Emily felt they'd done a great job. The box was battered and dirty, the clear tape around it looking thick and yellow, and the letters were pieced together out of newspaper clippings. It was a nice touch, if not a little cliché. The letter inside was no exception. The whole thing was made of magazine and newspaper letters, meticulously assembled by hand. At least, it appeared as such. Emily couldn't imagine how much time this had taken whoever had put it together, especially if they had to build more than a few of them. Emily had to applaud their commitment, but it wasn't something that seemed feasible long term. She would be surprised if this level of detail persisted, and took the note out of the box so she could read it. This is the case of the West End Tooth Fairy.
He has a kill count of around 26 and was most prominent between 2019 and 2022. His first victim was Miss Mary Klein, a retired teacher who lived alone. It took the police almost 4 years to place her as his victim, only then because his pattern began to surface. She was stabbed 15 times, most of them in the chest, and a smile was carved across her mouth from ear to ear. No forensic evidence was discovered at the scene, no sign of forced entry, and she was left in her favorite chair in the living room. No one was charged with her death, and only one item was ever reported missing from the victim: the bottom and top plate of her dentures. Emily read it over a few times, but couldn't figure out what she was supposed to be looking for. This was less of a case file and more of a story. Emily had read a few articles about how the information was disseminated and then picked over by the community, but this read more like a creepypasta. She wondered if this might be one of those things where a group member got a different piece of the puzzle, but that was another point of confusion as she looked through the box. As she looked, Emily saw a plastic baggie with a pair of pliers inside. She took them out hesitantly, the red around the teeth of the pliers looking pretty convincing. Emily gave the box a once-over, finding them a pretty good prop for the price of the box service. Once the pliers and the note were out, though, the box was empty. There was no group code or information on getting up with the rest of your team, and after a thorough search, she found nothing. Emily shrugged, not too upset about it. They had probably just forgotten to add it, and she figured that a quick trip to the internet would get her in contact with her group. She was still excited about her quick admittance to the group, and hopped on the site to see what she could find. A little while later, Emily closed her laptop with a huff of frustration. She had checked every group, but no one was following the Tooth Fairy case. No one seemed to know what she was talking about either, and it was starting to make her wonder. Maybe the others would sign up soon. Maybe she had gotten her box a little too early. In the end, she set up a room for the Tooth Fairy case, figuring the others would find her, and decided to go to bed. She'd sign on tomorrow and find that they had discovered her, and then the game could begin. Instead, she woke up to find another dodgy package on her front porch, and only a few messages in the room she had started, none of them helpful. The people who had found the room appeared to have used her post as an excuse to belittle her. The 3 or 4 users who had left comments were quick to remark that the Tooth Fairy case was little more than an urban legend, not likely to be something Catch a Killer would tackle. They made fun of her for even suggesting that they received a case file on this one, and decided that she must be trolling. Today's box looked like it had gotten wet, and the cardboard was dark and distorted. Emily huffed and deleted their comments, setting the box on the table as she cleared her own inbox. This was what she got for asking for help on the internet. Most of these people were just shut-ins with little more to do than bother her, and she knew she shouldn't take it personally. Even so, Emily reflected that it was frustrating that none of the others who'd received the case files had hopped in to share information. As she sat grumbling at the computer screen, she found her eyes straying to the box and finally decided to open it. The material felt as damp as she'd expected, but that only added to the mystery. It hadn't rained last night, or for the last few days, and she couldn't believe that anyone would have delivered a package in such condition. And why was it here so early? It was near noon, but the mail didn't usually run until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. The box had been waiting for her when she opened the door, leading her to believe that it had been dropped off much earlier. Inside the box was another of those strange notes, the letter made of magazine clippings, and an envelope that she thought might contain pictures. His next victims were the Hughes children, Mary, Shelley, and Clark, ages 12, 10, and 8, respectively. Coming in through the window in their bedroom, he tied them up and made them watch as he stabbed them to death from oldest to youngest. Each of them was stabbed 20 to 30 times. Their parents found them the next morning, both having slept through the night as their children died mere feet away. The oldest child was found to have her lower canines removed, the middle child her bottom incisors, and the youngest was missing his bottom premolars. The teeth were believed to have been taken as a trophy, and that was when the police began calling him the Tooth Fairy, though the press wouldn't start using it until much later. As she took out the pictures, Emily felt her blood run cold as she flipped the top back. There were 12 pictures inside, all seemingly taken with a Polaroid camera. All of them were of crying children, their hands tied behind them and their mouths stuffed with whatever they had at hand. The girls appeared to be older than the brother, all of them bearing the same sandy hair and hazel eyes. And as the pictures carried on, Emily could see the fearful children becoming broken children. Their pajamas reddened, their wounds seeming to grow with each snapshot, and by the end, all three were lying on the carpet together. As their blood seeped into the thick shag, Emily felt the pictures slip from her numb fingers. What was this? It was a little too much if this was someone's idea of a joke or a game. She had wanted to be part of this game, but if this was the level they were playing at, she wasn't sure she was up to it. These Polaroids looked real, like something taken instead of made, and as Emily held them, they felt dirty in her hands. She put them in the box and picked up her computer as she tried to discover anything about the case that she was being drip-fed. This was the second box she'd received that felt more like a love letter to the killer and less like a case file. There were no clues to follow, no breadcrumbs to lead her to an outcome, just harrowing stories to listen to that ultimately didn't tell her anything. If this was how it was, she really needed to see if anyone else had received the clues she was failing to find. The forum offered more veiled insults, and Emily huffed as she closed the laptop. With no words from the admin and no help forthcoming from her fellow investigators, she couldn't do much but speculate. In the end, she dumped the contents of the box into the first one and threw the new box away. When her eyes kept darting over to it as it sat on the top layer of the garbage can, she pulled it out and took it to the outside garbage. She couldn't stand the way it seemed to be watching her, and as she came back up the front steps of the porch, she stopped in her tracks as she saw the last thing she expected to see. Another cardboard box, covered in old yellow tape, was on her welcome mat, sitting like a steaming pile of fresh foreboding. Emily looked around, suddenly not feeling so safe standing in front of her own house. How had she missed it? It hadn't just appeared between her leaving her front door and putting the box in the garbage can. It had taken a matter of minutes, 2 or 3 at the most, and someone would have had to place the box quickly and quietly in order to get it here in the interim. Someone like a serial killer who stole people's teeth and kept them as trophies. Emily shook the thought off and reached down to pick up the box. She must have just missed it on the way out, must have stepped right over it, but that didn't stop her from locking the deadbolt and throwing the chain across the door. She took the box to the dining room table, but it would be quite a while before she found the courage to open it. She looked at it as she cleaned her house, returning to it a few times throughout the day. She didn't want to open it, was honestly afraid of what might be in it, but it still hung over her like an omen. As fearful as she was, it was a very tantalizing mystery, and Emily loved a good mystery. As the sun went down and the shadows grew tall in her living room, Emily was helpless to stop herself from ripping off the tape. The box had the same wet, warped look the other one had borne, and as the tape came off, Emily was greeted by yet another handmade note and a long metal tool that made her grit her teeth. It was an ice pick, and someone had clearly used it roughly. The end was dented, the metal flowering up around the point of impact. The tip was malformed, that angry exclamation almost as damaged as the butt end, and it helped the red paint find its way into the porous metal that sought to drink it up. It worked its way into the crevices, and the dark red made the tool all the more grotesque. The fourth victim was Dr. Reynolds of the Norvis Free Clinic. Posing as a homeless man, He came in before operating hours and killed the good doctor before his staff could arrive. The Tooth Fairy had chosen Dr. Reynolds carefully, the two bearing a striking resemblance. It was easy for him to pose as Dr. Reynolds and continue to see patients. The next 12 victims were homeless people at the clinic, people he invited to come in after hours. The cause of death for all was the same as Dr. Reynolds, a single puncture wound to the side of the neck. From these victims, the Tooth Fairy completed his collection of bottom teeth. She added the pick to the box of other things before slipping it into the hall closet and going to sit in her room. Suddenly, the living room was a little too open, the windows too exposed for Emily's taste. She sat in bed, trying not to think about the boxes or the mystery that surrounded them. The more of them she received, the more she had to remind herself that this was just something cooked up by the company. It became harder and harder to justify to herself, though, as the contents became more graphic. She had read a lot of forum posts before signing up, and none of this seemed like the experiences she had read about. The cases were spooky sometimes, but there was always a group of people to help you solve them. Doing this alone was making her anxious, and the clues weren't really pointing her towards a suspect at all. This was reading more like a story, and less like a case. She wasn't sure what to take away from this, besides the crawling anxiety that surrounded her. She checked the group again, and found nothing but more people making fun of her for suggesting Catch a Killer would cover anything like the Tooth Fairy case. It's not even real. It's an urban legend. No, it's real, but the group only handles cases with suspects and evidence. The killer never leaves anything behind. The case is too high profile to let a bunch of amateurs mess it up by stepping on what little evidence they have. It was pages of stuff like that, but nothing helpful. None of the admins had posted either, and Emily supposed they were on vacation. They couldn't weigh in on forum topics, they couldn't answer her questions, and it seemed like they couldn't be bothered to do much at all. Emily set her phone on the nightstand and got ready for bed again, deciding that she wouldn't open any more of the packages until someone else messaged the group to say that they had received their packages. She needed help, she needed some perspective, and she wasn't going to get it in an echo chamber. As she fell asleep, she thought that at least it shouldn't be possible for them to send a fourth box so soon. It had probably been a fluke to send her 3 so close together, and she drifted off, hoping there might be someone to help her when the fourth arrived. She woke up the next morning to the sounds of birds and the gentle chime of her phone alarm. Emily felt a little better in the light of day, the megrims of the night before lost with the dawn filling her living room. She booted up her computer, intending to get some work done today before her boss called and complained about her lack of progress lately. First, however, she wanted breakfast. As the eggs and bacon sizzled in the pan, Emily felt all the anxiety of the night before dribbling away. She had made too much out of all this. She always psyched herself up so much over these things. Between the quarantine and working from home, she'd had too much time to mull over these dark corners. It might be time to get some of this under control. Maybe the box service was a little too much. She should cancel it and try again some other time. She had taken her phone out to do just that, her breakfast balanced on top of a cup of coffee, when something caught her eye in the peripheral. She was standing in the foyer, heading for the little office that she'd set up in the living room, when the spot found its way into her peripheral. She imagined that she could hear the tendons in her neck creaking as she turned her head to see if her fears were correct, and felt the plate wobble as the coffee shook in her hand. It couldn't be. It was 7 a.m. The mail hadn't even thought about running yet. The package was sitting on the front porch, the center of her welcome mat, leering at her through the glass of the front door. She stood there for a count of 30, her mind whirling at the sight of the large brown box. But in the end, she didn't drop her food or dissolve into a puddle of terror. She turned away from the door and went to her desk. If she meant to continue buying box services, eggs, coffee, or paying the mortgage on her house, she needed to do some work. As she got to her tasks for the day, Emily found that her eyes just wouldn't stay off the package on the stoop. She couldn't see it from her desk. There was a wall in the way. But the mirror in the foyer gave her a perfect view of the front door. She had placed it there to see people when they came up. But now what appeared less than convenient. She tried to keep her mind on medical coding, but it was difficult with the non-existent eyes of the package on her. Her mind itched to see what was inside, little as she wanted to. It would be another horror show, she was certain, and it would be for her alone, since no one else seemed to be sharing it with her. Around 11, Emily finally sighed in frustration and pushed the keyboard away. She had done almost nothing in the 4 hours that she'd been working, and the sooner she got the package out of her mind, the better. She got up to go bring the package in, but as she moved into the foyer, she stopped again. There was a second package sitting in the shadow of the first. She stared at it, her mind reeling as she pondered how it had gotten there. She had a perfect view of the door. There was no way that anyone could have snuck up and delivered a package in broad daylight without her seeing them. She stepped towards the door, feeling the tug of curiosity, but stopped as she saw the obvious answer. The second box was a little smaller than the other one. In her apprehension at the sight of the box, she had just overlooked the second one. That was it, just a failure to notice. The thought made her feel secure enough to turn away from the door and go make some lunch. She was coming back with her sandwich and a fresh cup of coffee when she looked again and saw a third box perched on top of the first. She'd been thinking that she might be able to get some work done, but seeing that third box, that dark brown cardboard monstrosity, she began to doubt the web of excuses that she had crafted. If they could sneak in a third box, they could have easily slipped in the second. If it hadn't been there, they had slipped in while she wasn't looking and delivered it without a sound. She returned to her computer long enough to find the contact information to Catch a Killer and called their customer service line. This was getting out of hand, and if no one was going to return her messages, then she'd just go to the source. Mazer Incorporated, this is Janet speaking. How may I direct your call? Emily wet her lips, not expecting such a quick response. She plowed on before the anger could cool, though. Yes, I'm trying to reach someone with Catch a Killer box service. This was the number they had listed online, and I... But the bubbly woman on the other end cut her off. Of course, 1 moment, please. 30 seconds of canned music later, and another far too happy young woman picked up the phone and asked Emily how she could help her. Yeah, I recently signed up for your service, but I think something's wrong. I've received at least 6 packages in the last 3 days, and it's always at random times. I can't seem to find anyone online that's part of the same group as me, and I think I'm getting parts of cases that require other parts to solve. The level of detail is really impressive on the boxes, but the volume is a little creepy. I think I'd either like to be put in another group or just cancel the service altogether, please. The woman mm-hmmed and I seed through the whole conversation, and the background sound of keys clacking made Emily grit her teeth. I'm terribly sorry you're dissatisfied with our service, ma'am. You can absolutely have a refund, and I'll cancel your service. Feel free to keep the materials you've already received for your trouble. Do you know which case file you're assigned to? It's the Tooth Fairy case. The clicking abruptly stopped. You must be mistaken, ma'am. That's not a case we offer at this time. Not one we plan to offer in the future, either. Emily had been pacing, but stopped as the woman's words fell on her like a piano. That's the information I've been getting in the mail. All the boxes contain these little handmade letters and pictures and descriptions of murders. Let me get your information, ma'am. I'll see what group we have you assigned to. Emily gave her the info she'd filled in on the website, and after a few minutes of clicking, she could swear she heard the woman's teeth grinding together. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you aren't on our client list. You're on our tentative approval list, but we haven't taken your payment for the current cycle of case files. Emily stopped in the foyer, glancing fitfully out the front door as she tried to make sense of all of this. There was a fourth box on top of the other one, and as the golden afternoon set over the house, she felt a chill creep up her spine. "What does that mean?" she whispered, not daring to speak too loudly. "It means that whoever's sending you those packages isn't anyone from our office." Emily was speechless, and as the woman called to her from the other end of the phone, she let it slip out of her hand and tumble to the hardwood. Emily wanted to call the police, but her curiosity was piqued. It was the same curiosity that had led her to sign up for the service in the first place, but now it had led her into a mystery that she hadn't been prepared for. As she wrapped her hand around the doorknob, she knew that there was no going back. If she looked in those boxes, if she cut the tape and saw what lay inside, she'd never be able to go back again. She opened the door, poking her head out like a groundhog from his hole. She expected something to be waiting out there for her, but the porch was empty except for the boxes. She juggled the four of them into her arms and brought them inside, closing the door and twisting the deadbolt before taking them to her bedroom. She left the phone in the foyer, taking all the boxes and locking herself behind her bedroom door. Spilling them onto her bed, she wondered what order she would open them in. Looking at them again, though, she realized each was numbered with a quick squirt of magic marker. Taking the largest, the one with the childish 4 on it, she strained a little at the weight of it. Something rumbled angrily inside, and as she slid her penknife over the tape, she was unsurprised to find a roofing hammer inside. Like the chisel, the head was spattered with a deep red stain, and the tines on the end were likewise painted. What had the third box said? His victims had been killed by blunt force trauma to the base of the skull. After seeing the pictures of the children, she doubted he could contain himself from cutting and slicing them after the fact. He'd wanted to kill them quickly before they could give him away, but he still wanted the thrill of slicing them up. The note inside was quite illuminating. His next 3 victims were an odd fellow looking to have some teeth extracted, a census taker that he suspected might be working for the police, and the private detective that ultimately caused him to abandon the free clinic. The detective had a friend in the local police force, a friend whom he'd told before heading to investigate the rumors of missing people at the clinic. The tooth fairy avoided the raid meant to catch him and added 6 more teeth to his collection. From the old man, he took the front incisors. From the census taker, the 2 top incisors next to them. Finally, from the nosy investigator, he took the top canines and left on a bus as the police raided his hunting ground. She paused before opening the 5th. Had she heard a sound in the living room? She wanted to check, but the knife made such a satisfying sound on the tape as she opened it. Inside was a business card for someone named Carol Barner. The legend beneath proclaimed her to be a webmaster from Mazer Inc., and Emily suspected that she already knew what the note would tell her, how easy it had been for the packages to arrive at her house, almost like someone had her name and address. She thought again that she'd heard a noise from the living room, the breaking of glass or the crunch of a boot crushing something fragile. It might even been the breaking of a phone, as someone stepped on it after she'd carelessly left it in the foyer. She read the note quickly, wondering how much time she had left. His next victim was Carol Barner. Carol was selected at random, a crime of convenience that turned out to be very helpful. Carol was his neighbor, someone who worked from home as the pandemic raged. Carol liked to work late into the night, and her keyboard was so very loud. He had tried to be good, tried to lay low for a while as he settled into a new town, but the clack, clack, clacking was driving him mad. One night, as he watched 2 o'clock roll by with no reprieve, he took the continued noise as a sign from above. He broke into her apartment, and she never even noticed over the sound of her keyboard until it stopped tapping forever. In doing so, he discovered what it was she'd been working on, and found a way to finish his work without the hassle of finding more victims. He discovered the database that she'd been tapping away at, and after taking her premolars, he set to work. Her hands shook as she opened the next box, the knife threatening to cut her as it jittered over the adhesive. She could hear him as he moved through the house, being less than quiet as he yanked open doors and cabinets. He knew where she was. He had to, but it was all the thrill for him. He wanted her good and scared before he went about his business, and Emily had to still her hands as she read the note that lay atop the flyer for Catch a Killer. The flyer with the red stain distorting the K in killer and made it run like a wound. His next 8 victims were just everyday crime junkies, people who loved to research and speculate from the comfort of their home. He had a large pool to choose from, and it was easy to select those who wouldn't be missed or would take time to be discovered. Glenn Howell was a freelance coder with a passion for cold cases. Linda Merrill was a divorced housewife whose children had flown the nest, leaving her plenty of time to consume her true crime content. Courtney Powell and Linda Kane were roommates, and it was a wonder the 15 cats in their apartment hadn't got them before he did. John Boyd, Claire Keene, Reagan Summers, Casey Greer, they all took the bait and became true crime content all their own. Each kill swelled the legend of the Tooth Fairy. Each added another name to his tally, and each gave him another piece of the puzzle. As the police searched for him, looking for anything that could discover his identity, the Tooth Fairy found the last piece he needed, his final victim. The knob rattled, turning slowly as it hit the lock. Whoever was on the other side didn't kick, didn't yell, didn't fret. He knew they had all night. He knew she had nowhere to go, since there were no windows in her room, and there was no escape except through the door that he was now standing in front of. No one was going to come for her, and it was just the two of them until matters were resolved. He had to get inside anyway. Emily had all his tools. He had sent her everything he would need to make her another case file for some other true crime fan to speculate over. Would they wonder how she had been so easily caught? Would they question the validity of such a killer? Maybe the sheer idiocy of it all would help cement the legend of the Tooth Fairy into something told around campfires and under blankets as flashlights lit ghostly faces. Sometimes that was what really made the story, the idea that something like that could never happen to you. She opened the last box as he moved about her house like a fitful spirit, clearly savoring the moment. When she took the letter out, she yelped in surprise and let it fall to the floor. The last grisly totem fell to the carpet, clicking merrily as Emily watched it. It all made sense now. The name, the trophies, the order of the theft. He had needed them, needed to complete his masterpiece. He had to have a complete set, otherwise it wouldn't look right. She tore her eyes away from the grim spectacle and looked at the letter that was likely to tell her of his last victim. A victim she knew all too well. His last victim was Emily Colney. Emily fancied herself a true crime enthusiast. She petitioned multiple services since the beginning of the pandemic, but was never invited to join their groups. She wrote all of them in her application to catch a killer. And when it pinged on the database, the Tooth Fairy decided to make her dream come true and give her the true crime experience of a lifetime. Emily Colney, the perpetual shut-in on Hawthorne Street, would have the distinction of being the Tooth Fairy's last victim. After her, he would break his pattern, and thus become harder to link to the crimes that would come after her. So thank you, Emily. Thank you for helping me complete my masterpiece. The door shuddered, and Emily dropped the note. It fluttered down to land on the grisly trophy on the floor, and she was forced to put her hand far too close to it as she picked up the note. It was a mishmash, a golem, a creation of love and hate, and it hurt her to look at. It seemed that Mary's denture plates had been put to good use, and the teeth within them were as different as they were misshapen. He had lovingly set them into the plastic, and they looked like an animal trap, just waiting to bite. The false teeth were missing only one set, and as the door splintered, Emily grabbed the hammer she'd received the day before and held it at the ready. A hand slipped through the hole in the door, grasping the lock with a smooth and practiced twist as he opened the door and let himself in. She saw him then, rising to his full height as he filled her doorway like a ghoul in a cast-off coat. He was massive, his head looking grotesquely small as it peeked down from between his huge shoulders. She felt the hammer slip from her hand as the smell of him wafted over her, the aroma of dirt, campfires, old chemicals, and ancient blood. She didn't start screaming until he smiled at her, his spitty, toothless mouth revealing empty gums waiting for what lay on the floor between them, gums waiting for Emily to complete their reward for years of patience.
Sounds like a fun way to spend an evening. Coming up next, we have a board game that invites the worst of the worst to come to your house until you guess who they are. So let's hear a story starring the voice talents of my good friend Horror on the Rocks as we learn more about the Mystery Man.
I was looking for something to make my end of summer sleepover amazing. What I got was a sleepover that no one would ever forget. Margot, Jenny, and I had been friends for years, since kindergarten even, and we were getting ready to start 7th grade in a few days and wanted to hold our annual slumber party. I had the pigs in a blanket, the chips that Margot liked, the sour gummy worms for Jenny, and a huge bottle of Dr. Fizz for us to share. I was getting the movies ready when I realized I hadn't found our favorite game yet, and started hunting through the closet. We had played Mall Madness, a game my mom had given me from when she was young, and it was a hit at any sleepover. We would shop till we drop, charge it up, and then laugh about who had the best deals and spent the least amount of money. It was great. I had probably replaced the batteries in it a dozen or more times, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. I had always put it at the top of my closet, right beside my old Barbie travel case, but today it was nowhere to be found. I blew out in exasperation, wondering where it could be, but ultimately decided to go check the attic. The game had come from the attic after all, so maybe Mom had put it back up there. I pulled down the ladder, glad it was still daylight so it didn't look so spooky up there, and went to go look for Mall Madness. It was kind of a chore because Mom is something of a hoarder. Dad calls her a pack rat, and it seems pretty fitting. She keeps everything. She had clothes from when my sister and I were little. She's got art projects from when she was in school up there. And she had boxes and boxes of old photos and memory books, all kinds of things. I pushed aside a bunch of dresses and found an area dominated by old toys and games that she had saved. It was a mishmash of dolls and books and some old doll houses and a couple of dusty board games. I didn't find Mall Madness, but I found about 7 others. Apples to Apples was for babies, and Uncle Wiggily looked kind of weird. Don't Wake Daddy was missing pieces, some of which I'd lost, and Monopoly was just too long. I was about to give up when I saw a black box at the bottom of the stack that I didn't think I'd ever seen before. It was covered in dust, the letters barely visible, and I pulled it down, tugging it quickly so the other boxes wouldn't fall. I wiped off the cover and read the red lettering on it slowly, the red and black hard to read since it was so faded. Mystery Man, the name proclaimed, and I was about to open it and see the instructions when my mom called and let me know that my friends were here, so I ran downstairs to see them. I tossed the game onto my bed as I ran past, figuring we would check it out later, and we were soon all laughing and jumping as we got excited about the night. We ate dinner, we played hide and seek in the backyard, we hung out in my treehouse, and as it started to get dark, we came in to watch movies, play games, and start the rest of the evening's activities. Dad works nights, and Mom didn't really ever make us go to bed when we were having a sleepover. We usually passed out sometime around midnight, but tonight we wanted to stay up till we heard my dad pull in from work. We wanted to see if we could stay up till dawn, just to see if we could, and we had enough snacks and sugar to manage it, we thought. By 11:30, we had watched 2 movies, eaten most of the snacks, and drank half a bottle of soda, as we braided each other's hair during the end part of Balto. We were a little bored with movies, and Jenny asked if we could play Mall Madness for a little bit. That was when I remembered the game, and told them I had something different in mind tonight. The game had worked its way half under my pillow somehow, and when I pulled it out, my friends oohed and awed at it appreciatively. We opened the box and found a black board with silver spaces, the big orange phone in the middle having an honest-to-God spin dial on it. We had cards with descriptions on them, and it felt more like we were assembling a police sketch than a dream date. We would go around the board, landing on spaces and drawing cards, and when someone found a card with a number on it, we would dial the number, and it would help us determine the identity of our mystery man. "So it's a little like Dream Date then," Margot said. "Seems weird," Jenny said, "like we're hunting him or something." I looked at the instructions, but they gave no particular instruction on the purpose for making a description of the guy. We would take turns until we had assembled our mystery man, and then we would call 000 on the phone and give our description to the person on the other end. Somehow, they would know if it was right or not, and tell us that we had won, or tell us to try again. "Simple enough," I said, and I picked up the dice and rolled first. It was about 4 turns later when Jenny landed on a card that gave her a phone call. She dialed the number, but she was having some trouble until I showed her how the rotary phone worked. Mom had showed me, saying that was how they used to call people 1,000,000 years ago, and once she got the number plugged in, she held the phone against her head and waited for the click. Someone came on after 3 rings, a weird staticky voice that I didn't much like, and whatever it told Jenny, she didn't seem to like it either. After a few minutes, she put the phone down, her hands shaking a little. "Well, what did it say?" Margot asked. Jenny cleared her throat, trying again to get control. I'm not supposed to tell anyone. The phone man said the call was just for me." She handed me the dice, her hands very sweaty and a little shaky, and we continued. It was my turn to use the phone next, but Margot pulled out a card and laid it down. The card let her steal my phone call, and I laughed a little as I stuck my tongue out at her. She dialed the number and held the phone, interested to hear what was to come. None of us thought it was real. Well, Margot and I didn't, but Jenny scooted a little away as she made her call. The voice picked up, and something quick and harsh made Margot's smile slip off her face as she listened. Her lips trembled as she put the phone down, and she wrote something on a piece of paper and shook her head when I tried to pass her the dice. The guy on the phone said to let you roll again. He said some other stuff, but I'm not supposed to say. I rolled again and grumbled as I landed just shy of a phone space. I wanted to hear what had them so spooked. This was a board game, ages 10 and up and all that, and there was no way it could be that terrifying. We continued taking turns, the girls wanting to keep playing, despite their obvious discomfort. Finally, I got my wish. I drew a card after landing on a spot, and it was a phone booth. Searched the deck for a phone card and dialed the number. I took the first one I found and dialed the number, letting it ring 5 times before someone picked up.
Mystery man is blonde, about 6 feet tall, and a wide-brimmed hat. That's for your ears only, Toots. So don't tell any of those other little bitches what I said. I'll know.
That was a little weird, and I put the phone down with some hesitation. I didn't think they could say things like that in a board game like this. Margot and Jenny didn't bother to ask what he'd said, and I made notes as Margot took her turn. I had a blonde card and a wide-brimmed hat card, but I didn't have one that said 6 feet tall. I guessed I'd have to draw for it. Meanwhile, Margot had gotten another phone call, and as she listened, I saw her glance over at Jenny, and the look wasn't friendly. I didn't know what the phone guy was telling her, but it seemed to be making her mad. We played the game for hours, and in that time, the game got worse and worse. Anytime Jenny got a phone call, it nearly put her into tears. Anytime Margot got a phone call, it seemed to make her angrier and angrier. I tried to take the phone from Jenny at one point, offering to take the call for her, but she shook her head and told me the phone man had said that she had to take it, whether she liked it or not. Yeah, Margot said, her eyes looking mean. She needs to take her calls, just like the rest of us. As the game went on, we got more clues. I learned that my mystery man was a 6-foot-tall blonde in a wide-brimmed hat with a mustache, black pants, and a white shirt. I had most of that, but I was still missing the 6 feet tall with a mustache card. The man on the phone had alluded to the fact that Margot would soon make her move against Jenny, the two being like dogs ready to fight. And when Margot threw down a card, it looked more like a knife toss than a friendly showing. White glove. I get to take one of your cards, Jenny. Jenny nodded, holding her cards out like a fan, and Margot picked the 4th one, pulling it back smugly before glowering at it. You switched it, she accused, flipping it around to show Jenny a green sweater card. Jenny shook her head. Nuh-uh. Yes, you did, Margot accused. The phone man said you were a cheater, but I didn't want to believe it at first. Looks like he was right. I never cheated, Jenny said, almost crying. Then why wasn't this a green scarf card? The phone guy... But she brought her teeth together hard, and it sounded like wood clacking together. What? I asked. What did he say? Nothing, Margot said. Doesn't matter. Just play the game. Jenny didn't look like she wanted to keep playing the game, but she didn't look like she was capable of stopping either. The game would continue, whether we wanted it to or not. And after that, the phone calls got even weirder. I pulled a card, dialed a number, and was greeted with about 10 seconds of heavy breathing before he spoke.
The mystery man has a long, sharp knife. He's walking down the street. Turn left on Martin Drive. I'll soon be there.
That sent chills through me. Martin Drive was 2 streets away. That was like an easy 20-minute walk. What the heck was this? These weren't pre-recordings. This had to be live, but that was impossible. The game was probably 20 years old at least. It couldn't happen. Look, I said, hanging up the phone, let's just call it a draw. I think this is getting a little too real, and... The orange phone rang, and I felt my words wither in my mouth as we just sat there and looked at it. It was like watching a bomb tick down. none of us wanting to be the one to touch it. It just kept ringing and ringing, and finally, to my surprise, Jenny reached out to pick it up. Her hands shook, her breath coming in quick gasps. She lifted it to her ear, and I heard someone snarl something as she winced like she'd been struck. She held the phone out for me, hands moving like someone with nerve damage, and said it was for me. I took it and held it to my ear and said hello.
"Whether you play the game or not, you little bitch, the mystery man is still coming. If none of you wins, then he's coming to get all of you. But if one of you manages to win, then they might be safe. You never know. Better finish what you started."
I hung up the phone, trying to keep my teeth from chattering as I told them what he'd said. "That's not true," Margot said. "The phone guy told me that I had to beat Jenny, or I'd get taken. He said Jenny was trying to win on purpose so the mystery man would get me." Jenny burst into tears. "He said that you two were trying to sacrifice me to the mystery man and that I deserved it. He said I was useless, just holding you two back, and I deserved to get dragged away." I thought about it, weighing what he had said. Sounds like if we all win, then he can't get at any of us. We have to work together to get out of this. Jenny shook her head. "He said if I told you what my mystery man looked like, that he'd get me for sure." "Me too," Margot said, the anger slowly turning into fear. "Well, who cares what he said? He's coming regardless, so we have to do something." So we played the game cooperatively. Helping each other proved a better strategy, and Margot soon had everything for her mystery man. Margot dialed 000 and declared that her mystery man was 5'4" and bald, with a hockey mask and a machete and a white jumpsuit. The voice came from the rotary, making us all jump with its suddenness as it reverberated around the room.
"You have discovered your mystery man, Margot. You are safe for now."
We were still for a moment. Then Jenny reluctantly picked up the dice and kept playing. She got a card, dialed the number, and choked out a sob as the man on the phone told her about her mystery man. "He's on your street," she said, sobbing a little, and I rolled the dice so we could get to her turn again. "White glove," I said. "Let me see him." Jenny held up her cards, but she started nodding at one that was 5 into the stack. I drew it, and sure enough, it was the mustache. Now all I needed was the 6 foot tall and the knife. Jenny went again, drew a card, and breathed a sigh of relief as she dialed 000. "My mystery man is 6 feet tall, dark-haired, with a rope and a long coat." The phone made the sound again before declaring,
"Jenny, you have discovered your mystery man. You are safe. For now."
I picked up the dice when I heard something creak the door downstairs. It was long and loud, like a funhouse door at the carnival. I tossed the dice, moved my piece, and drew a card. It was a phone call, and I threw it away and rolled again. I moved, drew, and pumped my fist as I got the 6 foot card. I was rolling again when the phone began to ring. I let it ring, rolling and moving like a madman. I drew, but it wasn't what I needed. I got another phone card and threw it away. I could hear my mystery man on the stairs, moving as slow as any horror movie villain. I drew the gun and cursed as I tossed it away. I drew another white glove card, but I tossed it and kept rolling and moving. I could hear him on the stairs, his boots clumping menacingly. I had to find the knife. I had to banish the mystery man. If I didn't, it would mean my death. He came onto the landing when the ringing phone became too much, and I picked it up and put it down again. It started to ring after a few seconds, and I did it again before moving my piece. I could still hear his boots in the hallway that led to my room, and they grew louder by the second. Ginny and Margot were watching the door to my bedroom like it might explode, but I was focused on the task. Rope, toss. A wide-brimmed hat, toss. He was walking past my little sister's room now. He'd pass Mom and Dad's room after that, and then it would be down to my room at the end of the hall. What would happen if he got to me? Would they even believe Margot and Ginny? Would the mystery man leave them alone once he'd got me? I didn't know, but my heart leapt into my throat. I'd drawn the knife. I was done. I dialed 000 as soon as the door opened to my room. Ginny and Margot gasped, sliding away from the board and as far from the door as they could get. My mystery man has blonde hair, a wide-brimmed hat, is 6 feet tall, has black pants, a white shirt, and a knife. I practically screamed it into the phone, falling forward to cover it as I expected that long, sharp knife to stab into me at any minute. I heard the tone, and then heard the phone crackle again.
That was a close one, Heather. You're safe from your mystery man. For now.
I just lay there for a while, panting and trembling, as Margot and Ginny came to comfort me. They told me they had seen him standing in the doorway, his blonde hair spilling beneath his hat, and a sharp knife in his hand. He had raised it, took a single step, and then just disappeared into nothingness. We lay there, just kind of basking in the feeling of being alive, until I heard my dad pulling into the driveway. We had made it. We stayed up until sunrise, just like we wanted to. I went down and hugged my dad, who seemed surprised that I was still awake, but glad to see me, and then the three of us turned in. I put Mystery Man back in the attic, and have never touched it again. One brush with death was enough for me. So if you find a copy of your own while trolling through the thrift stores and antique malls in your area, be very careful with it. The mystery man you find might not be a mystery for very long.
One more story for you, and I think I've saved the best for last. It's a story about a strange YouTube channel where the creator lets us know his darkest secrets and his darkest art forms. So let's hear a story about the Meat Man.
It started as most things do, with boredom. I was surfing around YouTube, looking for funny videos or scary videos, when I stumbled across something that caught my interest. It was run by a user who went by The Meat Man, and it involved stop-motion footage using some very disturbing puppets. The thing that honestly caught my eye first was the thumbnail. It was a figure that appeared to be crafted entirely out of ground meat. I remember seeing the model and lifting an eyebrow as I took in what I was actually seeing. Now, when I tell you that the models were grotesque, I don't mean they were ugly or badly made. They were very well put together, and the amount of detail that had gone into them was astonishing. These meat puppets had hair and clothes and facial features that had all been meticulously crafted to the point of being a little uncanny. I would have almost expected them to blink or move on their own, and they seemed too lifelike for the medium. The episode I had found was episode 5, and as I watched it, I quickly began to realize that this was no normal bit of YouTube content. Episode 5 involved 3 characters, Lisa, Steve, and Michael, as they prepared for the arrival of a 4th character, Dawn. The background music was jangly and discordant, somewhere between a calliope and a merry-go-round, and it often made the voices hard to hear. The characters were cleaning up the house, which was mostly a sheet of paper with windows drawn near the ceiling, and some furniture crafted from modeling clay. As they cleaned, a voice told us how Lisa was being lazy and expected Michael and Steve to do the majority of the work. I remember thinking that was odd because her character moved and dusted and tidied at least as much as the others did, and they seemed to be working well together. After a few minutes of herky-jerky cleaning, a hand came down from the ceiling and congratulated Steve and Michael on a job well done. It then pointed a pudgy finger at Lisa and scolded her for being so lazy. The voice said that Lisa would not be allowed to join the party later, since she hadn't helped. As Michael and Steve walked off stage, Lisa's character curled into a ball as the loud party music played in the background. I remember feeling bad for Lisa as the last frame sat frozen in place, the camera zooming in on the prostrate Lisa, as she sat hunkered against the wall. Though I couldn't hear anything over the loud party music, I could see the small figure shaking a little as though she might be crying. What the hell was this? Why did it suddenly make me feel almost voyeuristic for watching the suffering of a lumpy knot person? After that, my morbid curiosity was hooked. I went to the attached channel and saw that he had about 10 videos up, all added within the last month or so. His channel was small, only about 80 subscribers, and they were all in that same stop-motion style, where he used the figure's grotesqueness to his advantage. I found the first episode, Friendship, and decided to watch it. The video was about Lisa, the meat puppet from before, and how she was sad and lonely all by herself. The puppet mostly sat in the same familiar position, bent over and appearing to sob. Suddenly, 2 other familiar puppets, Steve and Michael, came into the scene, and Lisa seemed happy to see them. The pudgy hand, whom she called Father, said that he had seen that she was lonely and had gotten her some friends so she wouldn't cry so much. The hand stroked her delicate hair, and it seemed to be much nicer to her than it had been in the previous episode. The 3 hugged and said they would be friends forever. Then the episode ended and the screen went black. It had lasted less than 5 minutes all told, but it still made me feel strange and put off. The puppets were so odd-looking, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was something not right about them. I was also hooked, and immediately loaded up the second video. It was like a train wreck. I needed to see how it came out, no matter what the carnage looked like. The next 2 episodes were pretty similar to what I'd come to expect. They were called Cohabitation and Family, and followed the lives of Lisa and her new roommates. They set up some furniture and had some getting-to-know-you chatter as wonky music played in the background, making their words hard to hear sometimes. It was the typical stop-motion fare, but there were odd refrains sometimes in the middle of the stop-motion. During one in particular, the boys, Steve and Michael, were talking with Lisa about what they were going to make for dinner. The stop-motion abruptly cut, and you could see 5 or 6 seconds of the model just standing, as loud sobbing came from the background. Amidst that sobbing, there was a soft but angry voice trying to quiet them. I had to rewind it a few times in order to catch it, and I remember wondering if this were some sort of artistic film or something. Was the artist trying to make some kind of point? Maybe he was trying to hide it amidst the stop motion or something, make it even more artsy. It wasn't until the 4th episode that things got bad for Lisa. I noticed that while the first 3 episodes had come out one a day, the 4th video had taken almost a week to come out. This wouldn't have been strange for any other channel, but the total shift from episode 3 to episode 4 was alarming. The video was about 5 minutes long, and seemed to entail Lisa going out on her own for a night walk and getting lost. She had gone out for a walk, despite being told not to by Father Hand, and had gotten herself lost in a forest that seemed to be drawn on white paper. The trees were the big swampy kind you often saw in kids' art assignments, and it was clear that Father Hand was no artist. He wasn't a consistent narrator either, because his voice and his tone seemed to get angrier the longer the episode went on. The condition of the puppet looked ghastly, and that only added to the surreal horror of the show. The Lisa puppet was clearly in bad shape, and halfway through the show, a piece fell off of her and landed on the table. The narration ended abruptly, as the music continued over the visual of the graying puppet just standing in place. The sound of someone stomping off was audible over the jangly Discord, and the steps sounded heavy and angry. There was a brief moment of someone begging to be let go, but it cut away just as the sound of screaming started. The video was edited poorly, and an attempt had clearly been made to cut it out. When the show resumed, the Lisa puppet was complete again, with what appeared to be a hunk of fresh meat attached. The piece that had fallen off, however, still lay on the table, as though it were no more useful than a snakeskin now. Towards the end of the episode, the Lisa puppet bent over and seemed to weep as she was alone and scared in the forest. This weeping was overlaid by a soft and frantic weeping in the background as well, though I'm not sure we were meant to hear that part. All of a sudden, the Father Hand came and showed her the way home. It scolded her for running away, and told her she must never do that again. Much like an actual father, the Hand seemed relieved as well as angry, and the meat Lisa went with him to the house meekly enough. When they returned, The Steve and Michael puppet did not seem happy to see her. They shunned her silently, and the episode ended with Lisa crying in a corner somewhere. Then the episode faded to black, and the credits rolled. I hovered my mouse over episode 6, not sure if I really wanted to watch it. Episode 4, called Thankless, made episode 5 make a lot more sense. Father Hand was still likely punishing Lisa for running away, though the start of the episode made it very clear that Lisa had just been going out for a walk. The episodes were easy enough to follow, but something in them still made me uneasy. Why were these characters living under this supposedly fatherly Hand character? Why did the narrator call them roommates if the Father Hand treated them like his children? The whole show was just odd and had a very surreal nature to it. There seemed to be an underlying story that I just wasn't getting. I was invested, though, and I had to see how it came out. Episode 6 was the strangest by far, and the comments on the video seemed to prove that I wasn't just going crazy. It was called Melancholy, and the episode started with the same weird dance music and a shot of Lisa hunched up and crying. The crying, however, was not the canned sound it had been before. The episode was 3.5 minutes of someone sobbing heartbreakingly, the kind of sobs that are equal parts hopelessness and terror. The camera seemed to be slowly panning in on the intricate face of the meat puppet as the sobs in the background went on and on. I had seen some strange videos in my time, but this one definitely took the cake. The final shot was of the eye of the meat puppet, clearly defined and lovingly traced. You could see the meat beginning to mold, see the bright splotches that decorated the surface, and just before the screen faded to black, you could hear the elevated terror in the voice of the person sobbing before it was shut off by the end of the episode. I had to take a break after that one, reading the comments as I tried to make sense of what I had just watched. The Meat Man's audience seemed to be a little divided on whether this was an artistic expression or something much darker. A user had said that the sobbing and the screaming had been unique, and that they couldn't find it anywhere online, or at least on any of the free sites. Another user questioned whether they were too real or not, thinking this might be part of someone's torture fantasy, but others seemed to think it was just an avant-garde piece, and that was a little too pompous for its own good. What they did agree on was that even if it was acting, the screams were a little too real, and that they all felt some kind of way about those cries of anguish. I had hoped that maybe episode 7 would be a return to sanity, but episode 7, called Jealousy, was just as weird. The narrator was telling us that the Dawn character was adjusting very nicely to the house. All the tenants loved her. They all wanted to be her friend. And indeed, Father Hand, Steve, and Michael were all standing around her and moving animatedly. Only one character, Lisa, didn't seem to want to be friends with Dawn. She seemed to be in another room, still hunkered up and crying. The narrator explained that Lisa was jealous of Dawn, and that Father was becoming cross with her attitude. The sobs from the previous episode were gone, but there were some other low noises, barely discernible over the loud jangling music. The puppets seemed to be in much better condition as well, and I suppose they had changed the meat out on them recently. The Father Hand came and yelled at Lisa some more, but she just stayed hunkered up and crying. Finally he left, and the episode ended as the camera zoomed in on the little meat woman hunkered in her anguish. I looked at the next episode and wondered if I really wanted to see more. It felt like I'd been watching for hours, but it turned out that all 7 episodes had taken less than 30 minutes. Something about watching the byplay between the characters had gripped me, and I felt that I needed to finish it. At the same time, there was something much darker here than I had expected. This was like someone's confession. The whole thing felt very intimate, and I felt almost voyeuristic for watching. I clicked the next episode, though, telling myself that another 3 episodes wouldn't do much damage. How wrong I'd been. Episode 8, called Hatred, opened with Lisa leaning against a paper wall as the others tried to get in her room. They started out nicely asking her to come out, wanting to talk, wanting to see her. The narrator told us that Lisa had been shirking her chores and saying unkind things to Father Hand about the other roommates. Father Hand had, of course, shared these things with the others, and now they wanted to talk to her. As their knocking became pounding, all 3 of them pushing and pulling at the door as they banged and kicked, Lisa pulled her hands to her ears and put her head between her knees. The narrator told us how Michael and Steve wanted to talk, and how Dawn was really upset that Lisa would judge her so hastily. As they pounded and banged on the paper door, Father Hand suddenly came into the scene. Lisa looked up from her knees and seemed unsure of what to make of the sudden appearance of the fatherly phalange. Father Hand told her that she had brought discord to the house and that he could no longer ignore her insolence. The hand turned itself into a fist and began to beat the puppet savagely. Chunks of meat fell off and were squashed beneath the pounding. The wire body was twisted and warped, and the whole scene was made all the more horrific by the overlaying carnival tune that scratched like razors across my brain. It ended as Steve and Michael knocked, and the camera zoomed in on the sad pile of meat that Lisa had become. The episode ended abruptly, and when I saw a pale figure staring back at me from the suddenly dark screen, it took a half a second to realize it was the sweating image of myself. Episode 9, Contrition, was next, and there was no question on whether I would watch it or not. I needed to know what came next. I needed to know how this ended. Episode 9 was as different from the others as night to day. It was a shaky cam of someone walking through the woods by night. A butter yellow light provided a small patch of illumination, and whoever was recording was breathing heavily as they trudged through the woods. The woods were preternaturally silent as they went, and the leaves crunching underfoot were loud enough to be jarring. The video was 4 minutes long, and 3.5 minutes were nothing but walking feet, crunching leaves, and heavy breathing. Then abruptly, they stopped before a small round stone, the ground before it freshly turned up and put to rest sloppily. "Sleep well, Lisa," came the phlegmy voice of the cameraman. Then it all went black again. I hit the 10th episode before I could think about it, wanting to see how it ended. Episode 10, Ambivalence, seemed to be a return to normal. Dawn was sitting on the couch, seeming to laugh at something on the TV that was out of view. Michael and Steve seemed to be milling about, cleaning up or just chatting. The wall that had marked Lisa's room was nowhere to be seen. The Father Hand looked over all of them, benevolently, as the narrator told us about Michael looking for a book he had misplaced, and Dawn watching her favorite TV show. All seemed well. All seemed normal, other than the broken corpse of Lisa that lay on the floor. The damage that Father Hand had done still lay about the ground, and the meat was brown and dry. Flies had begun to circle the meat body, and if one of the puppets had to go near her, they seemed to walk over her body without noticing her. The only character who seemed to notice her was the Father Hand. He would look down at her from time to time, almost smugly, and shake his head before looking back at the other puppets happily. Episode 10 went dark, and I was yet again left wondering what I had seen. The video seemed to have moved into my head rent-free, in less time than it would have taken to watch a movie. I had moved on to other videos, other activities, but the images were never far from my mind. I'd been known to suggest strange videos to friends of mine, even link them on Reddit to certain groups. This one, however, was not one of them. I was hesitant to talk about it, let alone tell people about it. I did not want others to suffer under this like I had, and that was probably why I was thinking about it when I saw the poster. I was traveling for work. I work as an expert witness for specific cases, and I do a lot of traveling and a lot of waiting, which often leads to the aforementioned boredom. I was driving through Michigan when a call to nature became too much to ignore, and I had to pull over at a nearby rest stop. I was heading to the bathroom when I saw the missing persons wall. My eyes found the woman before I could stop myself, and my breath caught in my throat as I came up short. The woman's name was Elizabeth Rainey, 23, and she'd been missing for the last 4 months. The poster was new, unmarred by yellowing or creasing, and I pulled it easily from the bulletin board. Looking at her face, I realized how much had gone into each of those puppets. Her nose, her wide forehead, the small dimple in her chin, the dent in her left cheek from some childhood accident. They were all there. They had all been lovingly added to the porous face of that meat puppet. I took the poster back to my car, my check-in time approaching quickly, and called a friend of mine who works with the local police department. I told him about the girl, about the YouTube channel, about the videos, and he said he'd look into it without much enthusiasm. When he called me about a week later to thank me for the information, he sounded much more interested in what I had to say. I called him again a few weeks ago and offered to buy him a drink if he'd sate my curiosity. He was willing, but said I might not want to know as bad as I thought. Over drinks, he told me the whole sad story. My friend had a friend too. His friend was an agent with the FBI, and after watching the videos, my friend had called his friend. He sent him a link to the channel and asked him to take a look. After his friend had watched the drama for himself, he had tracked the IP to see what he could find. Turned out that Elizabeth wasn't the only familiar face that was missing in the Michigan area. Michael Chavez, Steve Schwote, and Don Lee were also missing from the same area. The IP address was coming from an old house near Lake Huron. The owner, David Matthews, owned the house and quite a lot of the acreage out there. When they had raided his house, they had caught David by surprise and found more than they bargained for. He had been keeping them in his basement. The sick bastard had a large finished basement with 4 separate rooms. The central room held a couch, a TV, and a large kitchen table with a small set for the show and a camera. The puppets were on a shelf nearby, their bodies gray and sagging off their clothes hanger bodies. The other implement in the room was a large, rusty meat grinder. A meat grinder with strands of rotting meat hanging from the spout. He had said flies had been thick in the room, and the sounds of moans had not begun until they started kicking down doors. Dawn, Michael, and Steve had been laying in their respective rooms. Most of them, anyway, my friend had said, taking a long pull from his beer. He sent me the photos of the crime scene. I wish to God he hadn't. Dawn had been in the room that had likely once belonged to Elizabeth. David had been in the room that had likely once belonged to Elizabeth. He'd been wearing her dress, the fabric badly stretched around his frame, and was sobbing in the corner. No matter what the agents had said to him, his response was always the same, his rocking making a strange grinding noise as his bottom slid over the concrete. He kept saying, "I shouldn't have played God. I shouldn't have made her sleep." Again and again and again. The others didn't say much of anything. He had scooped them to the bone, cutting off fingers and toes, arms and legs, so he could grind them up to make those damn puppets. He'd used tourniquets and animal tranquilizers to keep them alive. Michael and Steve were a little more than torsos, Steve having half a leg and Michael a little more than an elbow. Dawn was missing her legs, but her arms were thankfully intact. She'd only been in the basement for a month, and it seemed he hadn't had much time to take from her. They had gotten all of them out of there, and David Matthews, the meat man, was now in custody. "A real win for the good guys," my friend had said, his stare 1,000 miles long, "though none of them will ever walk again. The men are in a catatonic state, and the girl only gibbers. But at least we saved them before he could finish his sick little play." They had yet to find Lisa's body, but he told me they hadn't given up yet. As I sit here, going over the facts as I write, it all just runs through my head like a rat in a maze. Every moan, every sob was this sicko harvesting his victims so he could replace the flesh of his precious puppets. I was an unwilling participant in this, watching and encouraging this sick bastard to continue. I want to forget it, but I can't. I may never forget what I saw in that short hour of my life. I may never forget the terrible knowledge that the meat man has invested in me, and I may find my curiosity sated for quite some time. I think my days of roaming YouTube in my boredom may be at an end.
And just like that, our stories are over for another day. But don't worry, I'll be back tomorrow with more great stories here on Cozy Horror. Until then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.